Welcome back, APUSH students. Today is Chapter 4 of the American Pageant, titled American Life in the 17th Century. If you aren't using the pageant, it's fine because the content is still going to be the same. I'm going over all the key terms and notes for this chapter that helped me get a 5, so I encourage you to take notes as well. First is indentured servants. These are people who volunteered years of labor to masters for something in return later on. Usually this was in the form of like a house or freedom or something like that. This labor fueled the successful tobacco economy in the Chesapeake colonies, which are kind of like the middle/southern colonies. The headright system was a system where people would pay for indentured servants to come to the Americas in exchange for land from the landowners who wanted the indentured servants. This exploded the wealth of masters who owned a ton of land and real estate because of the headright system, which they would just pay for people to come over and they just gain a ton of land. Bacon's Rebellion was a small rebellion in Virginia that was mildly successful. Even though it's just mildly successful, though, it is really good for evidence in your essays. It ignited the anger in the vastly populous group of poor freemen in Virginia, which led to the rich seeking less rebellious labor in Africa. This is a huge turning point right here because indentured servants and poor people who worked for masters, they were getting super distressed and they were causing unrest and they were starting to fight back, and the masters didn't like this, and they were like, let's go get people who wouldn't fight back like this, and that of course turned into slavery. The Royal African Company was a slave carrying business, and they took slaves to the colonies over the Middle Passage. When they lost the monopoly in the business, Americans began engaging in the slave trade. The Middle Passage is the route from Africa to the colonies that brought slaves. This was obviously really famous. You should already know what this is. And without this route, the slave trade would not thrive in America. But they had it, so it did. Slave codes / chattel. You don't really need the chattel part. Just know the slave codes. These were laws that made black slaves property for of their masters for life. These laws ensured the slave system could basically thrive in America indefinitely, as well as setting a long-lasting precedent for race relations in America, where of course you'd have the racial hierarchy of whites and then blacks. The Congregational Church was a form of government based in democracy ran by the Puritans. This was a great political system which allowed every man to learn and contribute to the politics. It showed the early forms of democracy being successful in the colonies. Jeremiad was a basically form of preaching where preachers would complain and they'd lament people for not being Puritan, and this was really successful because it scared a lot of people into becoming Puritans, and this was a response to basically the waning religious activity that was going on in the colonies at the time. The Halfway Covenant was church membership not fully converting people to Puritans, so this kind of it gave people political rights that weren't fully Puritan, which violated the view of the Puritans, but also helped get more people into the church, which solved the problem, like I said at the time, of waning religious activity. The Salem witch trials this is famous, everyone should know this, when 20 people were put to death for supposed witch activities. In terms of the APUSH context, it symbolized a larger scale issue of religious divide in New England between Puritans and Yankees. The Yankees were the kind of colonists who were separate from Puritanism. They were just focused on the bag, on money, not on religion. Liza's Rebellion was a merchant rebellion in New York against rich landowners. This has more kind of philosophical importance, I guess, when it comes to APUSH. It shows something about the American character, that they would not take sort of the economic and societal structures from the old world where you had rich people at the top and poor people at the bottom, and that they would have to have democracy and rights or else people would start fighting back, as shown obviously in this rebellion. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching, and I'll hope to see you in the next chapter. Goodbye.